it's Michelle for ColorfulEncouragement.com. Thanks for coming by. Today I'm making a distress ombre card with this recollection stamp set. I think it's called Hello Beautiful. I've got a piece of watercolor cardstock and some Modlon distress ink with my ink blending tool. Now when you do ink blending right, it's seamless and it just flows very smoothly from one color to the next. This one doesn't need to be that way, which is good because I'm not the best at ink blending. But because we're going to be layering several colors on top of each other, it's going to smooth out imperfections. I'm blending about 1.5 inches down from the top of the panel, and this panel's cut to 6 by 4.5 inches, and then we'll trim it down later. Distress ink stays wet for a while, so we need to dry it pretty well before we move on to the next step. I'm going to kind of flap it around to cool it off. And then we're going to use an anti-static powder tool to keep the embossing powder from sticking it where we don't want it. This powder tool is from EK Success. And I'm going to grab my Versamark ink and this peacock feather stamp, and we're going to stamp it 3 times across the top of the panel. And we're going to leave some gaps in between to add more colors and more feathers down the line. I'm going to grab my embossing powder and a coffee filter, which sounds weird, but it's really great for keeping the embossing powder from going all over the place. And the embossing powder will only stick to the Versamark. And then I'm going to melt it with my heat tool, and it's going to create a barrier, and it's going to trap that distress ink underneath. Now it's going to disappear because it's clear, but when we add the next layer of color, it's going to make that pop, and it's going to look fantastic. So I'm grabbing my next color, which is peacock feathers, and I'm going to start at the top and blend over those feathers I just put down and keep working my way down the page far enough down that I can add the next layer of feathers. You can use any stamp for this. You could use flowers or snowflakes would be really cute, and then you could probably fit more colors on the panel and not have to go down quite as far as I am. I'm measuring to make sure I have enough room for those feathers. And then I'm taking a paper towel to wipe off ink that wanted to pool over the clear embossing powder and dry it again. I want to test to see if I have this dry enough. So I'm just going to dump some embossing powder on there without adding any Versamark. And you can see I didn't get it dry enough and the ink is sticking in the wrong spot. So I'm just using a paintbrush to knock all that powder back off into the coffee filter, and I can try again once it's good and dry. Now my panel's dry and prepped, so I'm going to stamp it with Versamark and add my second layer of feathers. Then I'm ready to come in with my third color. But I'm going to turn on some music, and I will join you guys at the end to show you how to finish this card. guys are wondering why I keep shaking the paper when I dry it, it's because that heat tool heated all that embossing powder, and it's easy to smear when it's still hot. So I'm shaking it to cool it down a little. And I'm going back with the Mermaid Lagoon a second time to soften the line that the blueprint sketch left behind. We don't want harsh lines. And that's it. We finally got our panel complete. So now I'm grabbing my die cut machine. I have a big kick from Sizzix, and I have a stitched rectangle die from Simon Says Stamp. So I'm going to use my machine to die cut this panel and trim it down a little smaller so it fits on our card base. I'm just going to run it through, and I really love this machine. It just makes things so much easier. I'm working on a Ranger craft mat today. You can see mine is all stained up, but all you need to do is wipe it down with a paper towel, and it's clean, and it's also heat resistant, which is great with all the embossing I've been doing today. So I get that clean, and then I'm ready to move on. This is a piece of vellum cut to 1x8, and this Hello Beautiful sentiment is from the same stamp set as the feather, but you can use any sentiment you want. This would be beautiful for almost any occasion with the right sentiment. So I'm going to be stamping with my Versamark onto the vellum, and this time I'm using white embossing powder so it'll show up. And you need to be careful when you're heat embossing on vellum because it's easy to overheat the vellum and warp it if you're not careful. So we are going to start with a hot heat tool. You might need to preheat it for a few seconds, and then we're just going to keep that heat moving. And there are thicker vellums that are harder to warp, but I've just got thin stuff, so I just keep it moving and go very carefully. And now that we've got the embossing done, we're going to attach it to our panel. Now I want to attach this on the back because the adhesive will show through if I attach it on the front side. So I'm just going to wrap it around. So I'm going to use my Scotch tape runner on the back side, and the adhesive will be completely invisible. And then I'm just going to trim off those ends a little bit so they're not in our way. Now all our hard work's paying off. We're ready to attach our panel to the card base with tape runner. And the card is just about finished. I just want to add a few little sequins. These are crystal sequins from Doris. I have them in this little pill container, but it's a great way to hold them all, and I don't run the risk of mixing them or spilling them. So I'm using glossy accents to attach these sequins. I'm just going to add a couple of drops and attach my sequins, and I am all done. I'm so glad I got to share this tutorial with you, and I'm glad you could join me today. I will see you next time.